So the game plan for this morning will be a recap of a few goodies in version 4.4 since our last webinar. We always add new features in existing versions without publishing a new version. So they're usually small little corrections or new little features, etc. We'll take, of course, an overview of the major changes in version 5.0. The latest version is of September 16th, I believe, and we'll soon be putting online a new version 5.0. So there's no rush in updating your current version. We'll look at some important features which are in previous versions, which people have maybe not have been using sufficiently. And finally, we'll look at our new software as a service version of Marjo. I don't encourage you to change systems, but just so you'll know it's available. So very quickly, what's new in version 4.4 since our December 18th webinar? This is in 2018. Electronic funds transfer, don't forget now in the US, you can now work with a company called Intrix. They're based in California, where they're our third-party processor for electronic funds transfer for ACH. You can now enter bank information for multiple borrowers in one window, as opposed to opening up each borrower file and then changing or entering the banking information. It can now be done with what we call global changes. And you can activate your EFT records in one click. In older versions, you had to do this one by one, which was a pain when you had a few hundred to activate. So the way to change this is usually by file, borrower, and then global changes. We've created a sandbox before updating. This is a really useful feature. For example, before updating to version 5.0, we do encourage users to use the sandbox. And if we look at the next slide, it's called the comparative installation. What this will do, it's a almost fully functional version. It installs on the side, and you can check out to see if the totals are the same. There's a nice little button to see if the changes, if the interest is the same. It should be. And also it allows you to test your reports, especially if you have custom reports created for you. It's a good thing to work a bit in what we call the sandbox. I go back. When people do imports via Excel, when they batch import multiple loans, multiple borrowers via an Excel file, we've improved the import with a better memory of the Excel columns. So I encourage you to go on the website, what's new in the knowledge base, look under the last year's webinar. Okay, so let's begin with version 5.0, what's new. Those of you who have updated the software notice that it's a nice, more modern look. We haven't changed the way you work. We want to keep it the same because I really don't enjoy changing methods when working in software. So we keep the same, but we modernized the graphics. We can also have now 4K screens or high resolution small screens. Tablets work much better than before. So I don't really encourage people to go with 4K screens. They're horrible for working on. They're great for videos, but not for actually desktop working. That's a nice feature. Multiple records can now be opened at once. So if I open up this record, I can open up a second one. And I believe you can open up to 4 records at once. Whoops, how many did I open up here? So I have 3 records that can be opened up, etc. So you can play around with them and do all that kind of stuff. Before, you had to open up 2 versions of the software. I'm not sure if many of you do leases. If you want to use, we have a little calculator here. So leases usually have sales taxes in there. So if you go to tools, under other, there's a sales tax calculation. So let's say there's $100 payment. You can add the taxes in there while you're working in an actual account. So that's kind of useful to have, really. So you can open up and then calculate your taxes in there. We now have, you'll notice here, totals at the bottom of each monetary or number column. They're all in here, along with this has always been there, but this is practical to see. So my people owe me 462 million, I wish, today. So that's a nice feature to have. And some clients have said, hey, I don't want all my users to see this information offhand. So we're going to create, I think it's already done, but in the upcoming version next week, I guess, there'll be a place where you can hide these totals up here. So they're not easily accessible. Okay. Notice also a quick tutorial here. If I click here, it's more for new clients, but it'll give you really an overview, a very quick overview of the software. And the admins can actually customize the content so that if you have new users, you could change the content of each of these little slides here. So it's kind of useful for that. We've done quite a bit of behind the scenes. That was the main work in version 5.0. It's behind the scenes. We've improved our calculations in odd scenarios. We did some reporting fields harmonization. So much better performance, I would think, mathematically. It was already very good before, but it's even improved for special situations. A cool feature is now that you can change your first date, your first payment date. Let me just fix this up here very quickly here. I don't want to see the start date, and I'll come back to this afterwards, by the way. I just want to see this. I'm going to lock these couple of lines here. This was supposed to be already done for me. And because you'll see when you update to the new version, you might see what I'm seeing here, which is not really nice. But once it's fixed, you'll be all set. So I'm just going to make this a bit wider, etc. So I'll get back to this right after. Oops, line status. Okay, so if we look at record 15, where is my record number? If I look at my record 15, it's a new record, 15430. 430, why don't I have it? That's probably one of these anyways. I can now go in my first line and change the date to the 20th, for example. I couldn't do this before, but this is only for new loans. So if you have a loan created in version 4.x, you won't be able to change it. You'll notice in some cases, if I look at record 10106, if I look at this is an older record, if I try changing the date, 06, it'll say, hey, you cannot change this specific date since it's the original line. So just bear in mind that as of now, any new loans created in 5.0, you'll be able to change the start date, the first payment date. Okay, we have added a new column fee. We know where you have NSF fees as columns, late fees, for example. There were 3, now we have a 4th, and probably 2 more will be added eventually. So you'll have up to eventually 6 column fees. Late payments, taxes, escrow, whatever, you'll have a lot more information in there. Something people requested, especially for late payments. Go to tools, again in my column fees. If I go to column fees automatic, we added a new feature in which it's a percentage of the payment amount. This is really in scenarios where the guy is 12 days late. You give him a grace. If it's less than 10 days late, I will not charge you extra fees. I'll charge extra interest, but not extra fees. So, but if it's over 10 days, I'm going to charge you 2% of what you paid. So the guy paid the right amount. He paid his $250. That's fine. But then I will add another 2% on that amount. All right. Close this up. We added batch emails. So you can send, if I select the loans I want, I right click with the mouse, I go on send email. So I can batch send emails with a template, a 48-hour reminder. It wouldn't be in here, but you could, have your send an email to all your clients saying, we have something new or whatever, so you can batch them all at once. It goes through a default email or whoever you want as the user. This can also be sent in the loan directly. If I click on this little send email, this will send one email with the template. This doesn't stop the fact that you can send, of course, emails with what we call the statements and invoices, where you usually will attach a PDF document to it. We've created also new line statuses. One which people will appreciate is one called paid principal. So in this case, I want to pay $500 in principal. It'll pay directly without paying the outstanding interest. So paid principal is 500, paid interest is 0. You could do this with the right mouse click. If you remember in older versions, a fixed principal amount, you'd be able to do this for upcoming payments also. But now when you say the guy is really going to pay pure principal, you wouldn't have to go through this method, which is a little faster for you. Don't forget that in version 4.4, we had also created interest paid. Where's my interest paid? And you have two called interest charged, and this one you can change the name, interest charged, if you want to specifically add interest on a date. We also have one called compensatory payment, which is very similar to additional payment. Maybe it's a better word, and you can change this name. You would use this if you want to say, it's a new payment. I wasn't expecting this payment. It's to compensate for a bounced check, for example. And with a compensatory payment, the expected payment will be 0, thus reducing your outstanding amount. On to slide number 2. We have, do not save. In the main window, we have what we call a list of applications. If you're doing pretty high volume, you're with a website, for example, where people will apply via a website for a loan, you're able to import JSON files, which is a common format, or an Excel file. You import a list of the applications, including the guy's name, the amounts they want to borrow, not the interest rate, but a whole bunch of also custom fields, the occupation, for example. These are custom fields which you create, how much they're applying for. And you can either have them, you can decline them, you can accept them, in process, etc. These are approved, for example. So if I was to click on one of these, this is it's pending. The approval process, why I put a comment or why it's rejected. It will also identify, hey, this applicant is already in there. He's already in the system. So you wouldn't add them in. You can have the employer information and any kind of custom fields. So you can approve the application and decline. And what's nice is that you can keep these in the system. They're separate from the database, so they don't take any place in the normal database. So you'd have a bunch of declined ones. If ever Arthur here, Kelly Arthur come back, or Arthur Kelly comes back and applies for a new loan, you'll know that we had rejected this guy already for some reason. Okay. Reporting now. This has vastly improved because of what we call the advanced queries. So no matter how large your database is, you don't have to select loans and sort loans. You can use the advanced queries. If I edit this query, the loans I want to include in my report are loans with the status as draft, pending, or active. I want the principal to be between $100,000 and $250,000, and I want the loans to be originated in 2017. So you can create these queries with a whole bunch of fields. You could say, I only want to have this creditor versus this other creditor. I only want to have these zip codes or postal codes. I only want a specific field to be included, etc. So you can become really, really specific. And you'll notice now in each of my loans, in each of my reports, I can select all records displayed in the main window. We harmonize this. The records selected like the old version, or records from my advanced query, and I can select among a whole bunch of queries which you'll describe properly. So even if you have 25,000 loans in your database, you don't have to select them anymore. You can create your report directly with the query without having to select anything. For those of you who have investors or multiple creditors who do participation loans, you're able to create what we call now a creditor investor statements. And what does one of these look like? Let me pick up. We created one here for you. So there's my activity. So Fund ABC. So you can send these out on a monthly basis. You will find below your portfolio with your loan IDs or any. This is the information you decide to put in. My total loan amount, the interest paid, principal paid, etc. You define the information that's included in here. This can be up to 9 columns wide. And of course, you can select the information, the merge fields directly through. Let's go back to Margil here. If I go to my templates, you'll notice you now have a creditor investor statement. So you do once, you've done once, you test it out, and then you can use it forever and ever and ever and change it over time. In the what we call record list with period breaks, this is the report that allows you to do, for example, financial projections. It allows you to split the totals by month, quarter, annually, etc. Well, these 3 possibilities. This has been there for a while, but we've added 14 new fields: the aging, the year-to-date fields, the balances at 0 o'clock. So we've added a few more fields in here. It's a very practical report, and people aren't using it that much. Now at least you know it exists. If I go back to my merges, so this is the document merge, something that not many of you know this exists. That's how I call this template. I can include in my in the actual invoice statement or contract, I can include if I go under the general theme, see now this is new also, it's now like this instead of being the right mouse click. I have these detailed lines, formats 1 to 12. And these are defined by our clients. So they say we need this, this, and that. What's new in this version, you can change some content in there. If I right click with the mouse, I go edit detailed lines table. And now you have your 12. And you could say, okay, I want to change my description in here. I want to change this, this, or that. So it gives you an idea. You cannot change the actual content. You can say, I don't want to change. I want to change this to something else. But you can change the header per se. You can make him wider. You can try it out for various fonts, and you can put a landscape or portrait. Because when it's too wide, it won't fit in a normal page in portrait. So a little more flexibility. You don't like the word comment, change it to something else. Okay. Next, if we create a report with the record selected, let's say, let's go here. Okay, not very exciting. Let me choose a few more records here. We go back to the summary. I'll just pick up these loans, reports. I'll use the record list. I want a full report. I'll go between these 2 dates. I can show totals, of course. What's nice now, of course, you can save in Excel file. You all know that, but I now have a spreadsheet. So it's a bit like Excel. It's not as nice as Excel. It's not a perfect tool yet. I know there's a date problem somewhere, but it gives you the option to select and then copy paste directly into Excel, do some equations and stuff like that. So play around with it. But if you want to do major work, of course, you would save in Excel instead. But I know what we do when we manage a few things with Margil. We copy this and bring it to Excel directly without having to save everything. It's kind of useful. And this is for pretty much all my reports, anyways, all the personalized reports. We've added new fields, one of them being, we added maybe 20 or so new reporting fields. You know, when you create a report, if you click on new, you have all the fields. Yeah, notice now the fields are now on the left, so the themes are on the left instead of being on top, so you have a little more flexibility. You have the more popular ones, typical ones, which we use all the time. And well, I wanted to mention, employer data. So under borrower, you have a whole bunch of borrower fields. you now have the actual employer data. This was requested by a few clients, among other ones. We can go on now. Next. Version 5 is, yeah, we made quite a few improvements, and we also listened to our clients saying, hey, this is, we wanted to make your life a little easier. So one thing we did, if I create a new record, I can now, let's put in a date, 2019, 0909. Notice now I've added one extra period, 1 month. So my payments are monthly. So if I added an extra period here automatically, it's with this little plus button. If I say yes, it will add one extra period, whether it be a month, a week, 2 weeks, or whatever. If I say no, it'll put in the same date as my origination. So it's one less thing to do. Don't forget, you can always save defaults. That's always nice if you have some preset information. Very useful tool here. That's the first thing. When saving a record, there are too many clicks we found. So if I go in a record here and I change something, I say save, no thanks. I say save. Are you sure you wish to update? Okay, well, I've already changed it, but yes, before it asks you something else saying, do you want to update or create a new record? So what the tool allows you, there's an extra little fourth button here that says always update. And then it'll save the extra step of saying, do you want to save or update or save or replace, etc. So it's one less thing for you. Yes, I want to update. One less click. We've also gotten rid of a few things, a few irritants like we've added some do not show agains. So, sometimes it says, are you sure you want to do this? And yes, I'm sure I've been doing this 100 times, so there's a do not show again. Those are useful. I looked at this before, but the display, it's always, when we do updates, it's always a pain where I lose my columns here in my window. So every user can now more easily customize their window through this. So let's say, for example, I don't care about all these elements. The check number I don't care about. So I can really easily go in and get rid of them. And I can lock I want to lock up to here. I can lock my first 4 columns and always see these. Usually I only lock 4. So I got rid of these and I say save as default. So next time around, when there's a new update, you won't lose your nice, neat table. And this is, of course, based on every user. Every user customizes his or her window per se. If I say save, it'll take a few seconds. Fine. And of course, you can also change the width of each of the columns. We'll give it a few seconds here. Okay, it's done. So if I want to have wider, etc. Oh, I forgot to mention, you can also change the order, of course. I want to have my comment before, so I can put it up or down and then save it, etc. As opposed to before, you had to move them, which was kind of a pain. And now they're going to be a lot more stable. Other little things, a client asked us, they say, hey, can you add extra spaces in the email here? So we're now up to 175 spaces, which means you can have a bunch of emails. You put a semicolon between each. Click on the little button here, on the little question mark. You can also, of course, this has always been like this, but you can send email to text with the phone company. Participation loans, if we now click under creditor, we now have the option, it adds up my percentages or my amount. So if this guy is at 80%, fine. I add a new creditor in my participation loan. I will select ASCAP, whatever that is. I put in 20%, and now I'll have my 100. We see this often if there are many investors in one loan. I want to get the right amount here. So it saves a lot of time to get my exact loan amount in here. Okay. In the results table, we now have day of week. So we know when each of these days is. If I just scroll over it. Okay. Do not save. The overnight tasks, I'm not sure if you know this very well yet. It's as of version 4.4 or 4.3. Go to Tools, Settings, the automatic and overnight tasks. These can do automatic backups. They can check your electronic funds transfer in the morning at 1 o'clock in the morning, as opposed to checking when you walk in, when the first person walks in. It'll recompute the payments, sorry, not the payments, but the balances. For larger databases, when you walk in the morning, it takes like 2 or 3 minutes to update all the totals. So you can instead say, hey, do this at midnight or at 1 o'clock in the morning, and send out my emails at 9 o'clock in the morning, my automatic emails. And while this is the new one in version 5.0, I can rebuild the indexes. It used to be done manually. What this does to rebuild the indexes, it just cleans up my database index, and it adds a bit of performance to my database. So you can do this every 7 days, for example. It doesn't have to be done every single day. Let's see now. That's pretty much for version 5. A couple of things coming up in version 5.1, and we have a few more minutes left. In version 5.1, you will now be able to, with the global changes, you'll be able to import, there'll be a nice little button here. I'm not sure if it's going to be 5.0x or 5.1, I'm not quite sure, but you'll be able to import new data via an Excel sheet. You'll click here, you'll need a record number and the new data, so you'll be able to import a whole bunch of things, as opposed to entering one by one in each of the fields. So again, a time saver. We're also going to add due payment 4 and 5 and new elements in the EFT, especially for the Canadian clients, where you'll be able to not include some pre-authorized payments depending on the line status. So for example, you could say, I think that's coming up, you'll be able to say, I don't want to include due payment by check. So they won't be included in the EFT. So that'll be, I'm not sure, probably November or something, November or December. So last couple of things, I'd like to go over what we've created back then, a few elements which maybe you haven't really worked with already. Okay, well, my PowerPoint is not up to date really. Electronic funds transfer, ACH, is now available with Intrix in the US. That was about a year ago. In Canada, don't forget, with Perceptec, you can manage the rejected transactions, so the bounce payments, and automatically add fees, send an email, etc. So that's a nice feature. Take advantage of the overnight task. We mentioned this already, to generate the alerts in the morning, etc. Do backups, send out automatic emails. Don't forget, you're able to send out emails before the payment is due. For example, 72 hours before a payment is due. Dear John, don't forget that a payment is coming up on October 7th for $225. Make sure the amount is in your bank account, otherwise fees of $25 will be charged. So these go out automatically when you decide, maybe at 9 in the morning every day. So it saves on the bounced payments. You can also send out these alerts, these emails for bounce payments. Dear John, your payment bounced. Please call me ASAP and fees will be charged. For document merges, try, the old version was RTF, rich text format. Now it's we prefer the docx. If I go back to Margil here, what I did yesterday with a client, she goes, oh, it doesn't fit very well anymore. So what we did, we took an old RTF document, we copied everything, and we created a new one, we copied everything, we created a new one in docx format, and there's a lot more flexibility when we do a docx, because the word processor is much better. Oops. Oh, I have to close this up here, sorry. Okay, next, you can, if I go to Tools, Settings, you can now block users from changing. This was actually in version 4.4, but these are reminders. You can say users cannot edit transactions that are older than 30 days, for example. So if I put this in, the user would not be allowed to change anything in the month of August, for example, but they'd be able to change for September. You can also take, this constraint can be taken away for for certain users. So admins can change anything, whereas others could say, hey, you cannot change anything older than 30 days or even 7 days. It's up to you. You can also have mandatory fields. I find it's a pain when we do our demos, but I must have a unique identifier. For example, if I activate this, I must have certain fields must be filled out, otherwise I cannot save them. The problem is, if I don't have the information, I won't be able to save my document. So we don't want people to start putting in junk if we don't have the information 100% certain it's the right information. But again, this saves a lot of problems eventually. We now have, so quit from here. This was last year again. We have a web portal for borrowers and for investors. So this is my borrower. His number is that's his name. He'd have a username and password. I'm not connected here, but you would log in and he'd see his balance, his name, his next due payment, etc. directly online. And this is in real time. It's a read-only database where we pick up in real time from your server. We pick up the information in real time. So the guys have this as when they want. This can be for the borrower or for the creditors. The creditors would see all their loans in real time. Nice feature. Lastly, just to mention, we're up to about 700,000 lines of code in the software, and the user guide I think will be over 1,000 pages. The next user guide will be available probably in somewhere in the winter. They're very long to do these user guides. So training is key. You really should, if you don't have, if you haven't received any training yet, we can do training remotely, take an hour here, an hour there. And we also quite often do some on-site training. It could be 1, 2 days, 3 days in some cases. We do short days, but try really looking at your system, getting you a lot more efficient. Lastly, the SaaS version. The goal is not to have you guys change. If you're happy with what you have, keep your installed version. So we have an installed network. That's the thing you're using right now, most of you anyways. As a service where you pay on a monthly basis. It's hosted in a tier 3 data center. The updates, software updates are done by us, so you don't have to do anything. You don't have to do anything technical. Backups are done 3 times a day. Of course, it's high security. You can access it anywhere. It's a remote connection from margil.net. And for more information, you can contact support. Don't want to change, but know that it's there. So this pretty much covers it. So don't forget what's new. You want to see the release notes in detail. You want to update to version 5.0. No rush, since we're always doing little updates here and there. Questions, support@margil.com. For Intrix in the US, you can contact Roger Aurora. There's his direct line, 720-977-2000. Or give us a call to find out how it works. We can also give you the number for in Canada with Perceptech. And if you have any questions, feel free to call or email. And if they're interesting questions, we'll put them in a knowledge base anonymously.